Hello and welcome to today's webinar. We appreciate you spending the next half hour with us. My name is Sochi and I will be your host. Please contact me with any assistance you need or questions you have by typing into the chat box or sending an email to support@kit.org. The slide note handout for today's webinar is available on our online learning center in the research section of this event. Our webinar today is the benefits of youth leadership. Our presenter today is Jen McCool. Jen McCool recently joined KIT after almost 5 years as Director of Programs for Unified Theater. Unified Theater is a student-led, fully inclusive theater education program. It is now a program of KIT, which Jen is still managing. Jen has over 13 years of experience in program management, community engagement, and evaluation in theater and performing arts education organizations. And with that, I turn it over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Sochi. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining me today to talk about the benefits of youth leadership. Before we get started, let's take a look at our learning objectives for today. So these are the concrete things that we hope to accomplish during our time together. We are going to correctly define the 4 key elements of youth leadership. And I would really like all of you to be able to articulate 1 program benefit and 1 youth development benefit of youth leadership at the end of today's webinar. And a quick disclaimer, I will mostly refer to youth throughout the webinar, which means ages 10 to 18, but sometimes I may use children or students, but essentially we're talking about ages 5th grade through 12th grade. So this youth leadership webinar series is going to feature 3 webinars, and they will all build upon previous information, but learners can really benefit from information in any of these, regardless of prior attendance. Essentially, we're going to start today with the why. Why is youth leadership important, and what are the benefits to the program, to program staff, and to the youth? And these are the questions that we're going to dig into today. Our next webinar in January will examine the how to start. How do you implement strategies for youth leadership? What are some best practices? And what are some common challenges to be aware of? And the final webinar in February is going to ask the question, how do you make it meaningful? And this actually may be the most important question you can ask, because you can lay all the groundwork, do all the right things, but if the youth leaders in your program don't actually feel and act empowered, you're really going to be losing out on all of the benefits that we are going to outline throughout the series. So here's a breakdown of the topics we're going to discuss today. We're going to start by defining the term youth leadership and then discuss the benefits of youth leadership to both your program and to the youth who are enrolled in your program. And finally, I'm going to share a few lessons that I've learned from my experience with youth leaders in Unified Theater. So my experience in working with youth leaders was through Unified Theater. I was the Director of Programs for almost 5 years, and I'm going to refer to Unified Theater frequently throughout this entire webinar series, so I just thought it would be helpful to give a basic overview of how the youth leadership component of that program works. And toward the end of our webinar today, I'm going to share some specific examples of youth leadership from Unified Theater. Unified Theater is a fully inclusive theater education program for middle and high school students. UT typically operates as an extracurricular club in schools, and this is where students of all abilities come together and create an entirely original theater production. With the help of a teacher advisor, students take on the majority of the leadership roles in Unified Theater, which includes the roles of director, producer, stage manager, and inclusion specialist. And this group of leaders is responsible for recruiting their cast and crew, scheduling and organizing rehearsals. They run the rehearsal process, which does include a collaborative script writing process. And they manage the technical elements of putting a show together, publicity, and really all the elements of their final performance. And Unified Theater students have taken on all types of additional responsibilities in their clubs, such as choreographing dances, learning American Sign Language, ASL, and teaching it to their peers. They have advocated for themselves and their classmates to administration and school boards. They do social media and communications and a lot of other responsibilities as well. And Unified Theater had a Youth Leader Council for several years, which was an advisory board of students, and they were selected through an application and interview process, and they received additional leadership training and worked with Unified Theater staff on various projects. I'm using the term youth leadership as I feel it really best encompasses what we're talking about, but you may hear these terms in the literature or any further reading that you do about youth leadership. And I just want to point out quickly, peer-to-peer is actually sort of where I started in my phraseology and what we commonly use in Unified Theater before we came to KIT, but I've since heard that phrase actually also used in the business world for adults. And so I think that youth leadership is the most accurate term since we're always talking about children and youth. But I do think that peer-to-peer relationship is important, and it's important to think of the benefits of those relationships and youth being led by their peers when we discuss youth leadership. So I just wanted to draw quick attention to that. So these are the 4 key components of youth leadership that I think will really lead to success in your program. Youth leadership should always be voluntary. Children and youth must be given the option to take on leadership roles. As I'm sure that all of you know, making a child do something they don't want to rarely, if ever, ends up with the results that you may want. So in recruiting youth leaders, you can definitely approach a certain youth and encourage them, but it should never be a mandatory assignment if you want the youth to truly reap the benefits and be actively engaged in the program or the project. And autonomy. Sometimes it's hard, really, really hard for program staff to let go and actually give the youth leaders autonomy, because our instinct is often to micromanage or just do the work for them to make sure that everything gets done or goes smoothly. But really everyone loses if your youth leaders aren't given the chance to make decisions and do the work. And empowered is similar to autonomous, but while autonomy is about giving the youth a chance to make decisions, empowered means they actually get to implement those decisions. Staff really shouldn't override or overrule or try to change their minds or think that they know better what youth want or need. Program staff's job when working with young leaders is to help them implement and not to enforce limits. And the quick caveat I'll make here is that obviously staff are there to keep children safe and secure and participating in the program, and so those responsibilities don't change. But we want to make sure that when youth make a decision about their activity or a leadership activity, that they're given the power to implement those decisions. And finally, if you want your program as a whole to be truly inclusive of kids of all abilities, any leadership team needs to be inclusive as well. Children of all abilities should be given the same opportunities to take on leadership roles. So if you haven't tried to create youth leadership opportunities in your program or your organization before, you may be sort of stumped as to what that could possibly look like. So here are some examples of different types of leadership roles for children and youth. A youth council is one of the more formal ways to implement youth leadership in your program. I'll talk a little bit about the Unified Theater Youth Leader Council a little bit later, but ultimately this is convening a group of interested youth and soliciting their opinions, giving them special projects, and actually giving them some authority. And this is a huge leadership opportunity. And this can be a prestigious honor too. You can create an application process, do interviews, and select the best candidates and really get youth excited about their role. And officer and leader roles are another formal, more permanent route to youth leadership. You can create specific roles, and each role has a list of responsibilities for your program and let youth decide which role they want. You can also do applications for this as well if more than 1 or 2 kids is interested in the same roles. And this is the Unified Theater model. So each year the leadership changes or mostly changes as students graduate. So you also want to think about preparing younger students to take over in the future. Volunteer opportunities can actually be more informal, spontaneous leadership opportunities. So this can be as simple as asking, who wants to pass out materials today? Or who wants to be the line leader as we go inside? If you give a youth a chance to offer their help and assistance in an informal situation, there's less pressure. These can be small, confidence-building opportunities. And these may encourage a child to take on more formal leadership roles later on. You're sort of building, it's leadership a gateway, if you will. And children and youth always want to have input in their program activities, and they'll be more engaged the more input that they have. So this can be as informal as asking for consensus in a group activity. So which warm-up should we do today? Or you can make this a more formal leadership responsibility. Youth could join the warm-up committee, and their job is to decide in advance on a warm-up activity and to plan and to teach the entire group at your meeting. And then if you have opportunities for mentorship between older and younger youth in your programs, maybe you have a shared activity time during the day, you can let older children have a hand in choosing activities for everyone as well. Community service or service learning projects are not only great opportunities for building teamwork and compassion, but excellent opportunities for leadership. If you let youth take the lead in deciding on the project and coordinating the logistics, they're much more engaged. And this is probably more appropriate for high school aged teens. And finally, shaping program rules or program environment, giving youth a chance to collaboratively decide on rules and standards of behavior gives them a feeling of ownership and responsibility toward the program. And this can be done with the entire group, or even better, a small group of youth leaders can facilitate this process for the rest of the group and make sure that the rules and standards are posted and visible for the rest of the program, and you can have everyone sign as an agreement to abide by the rules. One of my colleagues, Viviana, worked with 3rd to 5th graders, and they created a Peace Patrol, that's P-E-A-C-E, to make their environment more accommodating for youth with Angelman syndrome who had hearing sensitivities. This Peace Patrol group created loudometers and trained the larger group as to what levels of noise were appropriate when the student with AS was present. And they also created a jangling keychain for the student that she could rattle near her ear to calm her when needed. And so the youth recognized that there was a need for accommodations in the program environment, and they took the lead in making that happen. Okay, so we'll do a quick knowledge check here. So you'll see a poll on your screen. There's a list of 10 words. If you could all go ahead and select the 4 key elements of youth leadership from these words, that would be great. And we'll just kind of do a quick check here to make sure everybody's awake and paying attention. So the 4 key elements of youth leadership that we just discussed. All right, and let's see. Hopefully we should have, yes, awesome. So you guys are totally with me. So yes, inclusive, empowered, voluntary, and autonomous. Those are the 4 key elements that we really think are the most essential for creating youth leadership. Excellent. Thank you all. All right. So now that we have a common understanding of what youth leadership is, let's talk about why it's beneficial. Why should we even bother to create opportunities for youth leadership? I mean, it seems like a lot of work. Is it even worth it? Well, obviously I think it's definitely worth it. That's why I'm here talking to you. I really feel that it will make your program better. I really, really do. And so here are a couple key benefits, I think. A great benefit for your program is that the youth in your program and your program staff will definitely develop stronger relationships. Ideally, in working with your program staff, your youth leaders will get to know them, build trust and mutual respect, and stronger relationships lead to more engagement for sure, but we also know that it's really important for children and youth to have positive relationships with adults in general. And youth retention and youth engagement both increase when children are given opportunities to lead and to let their voices be heard in their programs. In fact, more studies are showing that youth leadership is actually a key component in program quality and in youth engagement and retention. I mean, it follows logic though, right? So the more invested a child is in a program, when they're given a say or authority or responsibility, the more likely they are to stay involved and actively participate. So we can dive into that a little deeper here. High Scope Educational Research Foundation has created a pyramid of program quality, and this is a research-validated evaluation instrument, and it's based on data they've collected from programs in after-school, community, drop-in, camp, and mentoring settings. And the pyramid is based on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When youth have their needs met, they're more likely to engage in the program. So for anyone who may not be familiar, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory that explains that human beings need their most base needs met first, like shelter, food, safety, before achieving any higher function needs such as love or self-actualization, creativity. And this hierarchy is usually, the image is typically like this pyramid. It's very similar. So I'll just read you a quick quote from this PQA report that I think is most relevant to what we're discussing today. Most youth programs tend to score high marks for safety and achieve progressively lower scores as you move up the pyramid. But engagement and interaction are the most important indicators of quality. The youth programs with high engagement and interaction scores are among the highest rated by youth. In addition, the presence of youth voice, this is structures that involve young people in running the organizations that serve them, is the highest predictor of youth motivation. So I think this is a pretty key takeaway from today, that youth voice is the highest predictor of youth motivation to engage in a program. And on your slide handout, you'll see, if you go ahead and click and follow the URL down at the bottom, you can see this graphic in more detail, and you can actually read more of the report as well. So there are many benefits for youth that come from leadership opportunities. I probably could have spent 30 minutes just making a list of youth benefits, but I wanted to highlight a few that I think are the most important. Out of school time is so important in youth development and social emotional learning skills. There aren't many opportunities for leadership during the school day, right? Students can't really be a leader in math class unless they're really good at math, and maybe they get selected to mentor another kid once in a while. But what about the kids who aren't great at math or other academic subjects? When do they get a chance to hone those leadership skills? And hopefully the answer is in your program. I'm going to dive a little bit more in depth on specific social and emotional learning skills in the next slide. But we're going to also touch on positive peer relationships. And I think this is the most visible benefit of youth leadership in my experience. Not only do leaders develop relationships with each other through collaboration and teamwork, but they also develop stronger relationships with the other youth in the program. And this is especially valuable for inclusive programs, since kids with disabilities are often left out of social and peer relationships at school. We see so many examples of this in Unified Theater, but one that has always stuck with me is we had students Mary and Leah, and they became leaders together. Leah has Down syndrome, and Mary is a typically developing young woman. Mary was a director, and Leah was a choreographer, and they worked together for at least 3 years as leaders. And they discovered they had a mutual love of Katy Perry, trendy dance moves, for example, the whip nene, and frozen yogurt. And they literally became best friends, and their friendship continued outside of and far beyond Unified Theater, but they never would have built this friendship without the common ground of working together as leaders in Unified Theater. And the sense of community and belonging that youth will experience when they have a leadership role and they feel significantly invested in the program is really important. Every teen and tween needs that sense of belonging somewhere. And let's be honest, unfortunately, a lot of kids are not feeling that at school. Ideally, every child who participates in your program will feel that way, but certainly having a leadership role will increase those odds. So here you'll see the 5 main SEL competencies, and within each competency are multiple skills for youth to learn. And obviously every program will be building different skills and different SEL skills, but I think a lot of these core competencies are applicable to any type of youth leadership role. I may use specific Unified Theater examples here, but I just want to highlight some of these SEL competencies that youth leaders can develop. In the self-awareness category, self-perception, recognizing strengths, and self-confidence are big ones. You have to understand your skill set to be a leader and know what you're good at. So a very creative but unorganized youth shouldn't take on in Unified Theater a stage manager or producer role that requires paperwork and deadlines and keeping track of small details. And leaders have to have the confidence to stand up in front of their peers and expect to be followed, and that's something they have to build and develop. It doesn't just happen overnight. Self-management, really every single item here applies to leadership, right? Organization, motivation, stress management, setting goals. These are all vital to any long-term leadership role. And more temporary or spontaneous leadership opportunities may not apply here, but anything with planning and regular duties will improve all of these management skills. And social awareness. If your program is truly inclusive, your youth leaders will need to have as much of an inclusive mindset as your staff, and everything in the social awareness category relates to inclusion. Relationship skills, this category will really come into play when you have a group or a team of leaders who have to work together. Learning to compromise, communicate, get along, share responsibilities, help each other. These are all incredibly valuable skills, and not just for social and emotional learning, but I mean, those are just general life skills that we all need, right? And finally, leadership is all about decision-making, problem-solving, and reflecting. These tasks can be done with a staff member guiding the process, especially as younger youth, middle school or younger, sort of figure out how to navigate these skills. A great example that we learned from 4-H, youth leaders have figured out a way to make sure every voice is heard. So instead of voting yes or no, they vote on options using a weighted opinion. So they can hold up 0, 1, 2, or 3 fingers in their vote. So 0 fingers means absolutely not, I feel very strongly no. And 3 fingers means absolutely yes, I feel very strongly positively. So for example, even if they're just taking a vote on something simple like pizza toppings, you know, if they're asking who wants mushrooms on pizza, 0s or 3s then get to explain and argue their position. So a 0 on the pizza topping would be, I'm allergic, I literally can't even eat this pizza if we order it with mushrooms on it. Or 3 might be, these are my absolute favorite, nobody else in my family eats mushrooms, I never get to have them, we have to get mushrooms on the pizza. And so this gives the opportunity for people with really strong opinions to sort of argue their case, and those opinions are taken into account in decision making, which I think is a great solution. And you'll see, if you visit castle.org/competencies, you can see a much more detailed version of this wheel, plus just a much more in-depth discussion of the skills included within each category. All right. So let's actually, I'm going to just skip ahead briefly and come back here. So let's do a quick chat box. If everyone would use the chat box to send a message to Broadcast to All, and let us know what you think, one benefit to the program that we just talked about and one benefit to youth that we just talked about. And we can kind of think back to the 3 benefits to the program and the 3 benefits to youth that we just discussed. And these will be on the quiz at the end of the webinar, so this is a good chance to sort of refresh your memory. If anyone wants to jump in here and try and remember back a few minutes ago. Benefits to the program and benefits to youth. Positive peer relationships, absolutely. That's a great, great benefit to youth. Yes, retention in the program, that's a big one for sure. Social emotional learning opportunities, absolutely. So that's a great benefit to youth. And as we discussed, there is a myriad of ways that SEL learning can happen in with leadership opportunities. Yeah, so youth voice. I mean, youth voice is essentially youth leadership, right? I mean, giving the youth opportunities to be heard and valued is definitely going to make your program stronger. So just to recap, the 3 benefits to your program that I mentioned are stronger relationships with youth, so that's stronger relationships between staff and youth engagement and youth retention. And the benefits to the youth are youth development and social emotional learning skills, positive peer relationships, and a sense of community and belonging, stronger sense of community and belonging. Excellent. Thank you all for contributing there. So I thought I would just share with you all, and I will try to do this quickly because I know we're getting close to the end of our webinar here, but a couple of lessons that I've learned in my time with Unified Theater. So a lot of people, administrators or general education teachers, will ask, how do we have student leaders of all abilities? And you can make no generalizations about kids with disabilities and their abilities or their challenges, but a few things that we've learned in order to be the most inclusive in our program. Assumability. Until a child or their parent or guardian tells you that they can't do something, assume that they can. Because honestly, unless you are actively assisting this child daily on their IEP goals, you don't actually know what they can or can't do. And so we never want to condescend or create a sense of learned helplessness, right? So someone will just do it for me, so I'm not going to learn how to do this. And also keep in mind that not every child is going to participate in the exact same way, but that also doesn't mean that your group can't do something. So my colleague Kat works with Girl Scouts of America, and especially older girls in GSA have a lot of leadership opportunities. They're deciding their activities, their badges they want to pursue, their cookie sale goals, etc. So Kat was working with a young woman named Tanya and her group, and someone brought up rock climbing as an activity that they wanted to learn. And all the girls got excited until someone said, oh, Tanya can't do that. Let's not do it. Tanya has cerebral palsy and some mobility challenges. And so Tanya got feisty. She said, I could watch, I could take pictures. There are a lot of ways that I could participate. And she didn't want the group to do it, to not do it because of her. And she literally said, you know what, ask me. Don't just assume that you know what I can't or can't do. And so this is a great lead to my next point, which is that every youth doesn't necessarily need to participate 100% in the same way to be 100% included. And so we had a program where a young man who has autism plays the piano as an exceptionally talented musician. And so he would play the accompaniment for his group and found that sometimes the attending rehearsals with the entire group, because he was in a large group, was a little overwhelming for him. So he was sort of a special guest star at rehearsals. He would come in at his specific time, do his part, rehearse his piece, and then he would leave. And he was still a really valued member of the group, still welcomed and included, but that was just what worked well for his group. And again, no sweeping generalizations, but many youth with disabilities are capable of more than what may appear obvious at first glance. So just like with typically developing teens and youth, they perform better when we have high expectations of them. And sometimes you will work with kids who do need some additional support or assistance in their leadership roles. And in Unified Theater, where we have specific leader roles, we have co-leaders. So we have co-directors, co-producers. They're not assistants, but co-leaders. So inclusion is non-hierarchical. No one is elevated above or below anyone else. And in the Unified Theater model of inclusion, we do no buddies or partners based on ability. So everyone is coming together as equals. We never assign anyone to help anyone else. Pairs or partners may work together, but no one is elevated above anyone else as a helper. So the way that we do this is through framing. So if one of your kids does need help, don't say, Julie, I know that you're going to struggle with this activity, so I'm going to assign Cameron as your helper today. He's going to be your buddy and make sure that you can get it done. Instead, what you could say is, hey, Julie and Cameron, did you guys know that you both love the Red Sox? it would be great if you could work together on this activity today, and maybe you could compare notes and see if you have the same Red Sox favorite baseball player. So in this approach, you're laying the foundation for an actual friendship through common interests, and the youth are working together as a team, and no one is better or more important than anyone else. And lastly, just want to share a tiny bit about the Unified Theater Youth Leader Council, which was a great success. This was an advisory board made of student leaders who wanted additional responsibilities beyond their specific schools. They applied and were selected for a year appointment, and we met with them for a long training weekend over the summer and then once a month during the school year. And they were a great resource for feedback on the program itself. You know, what was working at their school, what other training would they like. This group also took on special projects like blog posts and video trainings. And so if you're willing and have the capacity to build an opportunity like this, it can really be invaluable for your program. So quick review before we wrap up here. We began by defining youth leadership. These are the 4 key components of youth leadership. Should be voluntary, autonomous, empowered, and inclusive. And the key benefits to your program would be stronger relationships between program staff and youth retention, and youth engagement. And this will ultimately lead to a better program quality overall. And finally, the most significant benefits to youth who take on leadership roles are youth development and social emotional learning skills, positive peer relationships both among leaders and among leaders and participants, and an increased sense of community and belonging. A few resources that you might find helpful. The chart of SEL competencies came from CASEL, which is really the preeminent research body on social and emotional learning. And a few articles here and a study out of Australia that I did not use here with this webinar, but may be helpful to some of you. And this is all on your slide handout. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sochi to wrap us up.
Thank you, Jen. We unfortunately don't have time for Q&A, but if you do have questions, please send us an email to support@kid.org. Following this session, you will be able to take a survey about your webinar experience through our Online Learning Center. So please take a moment to give us some feedback so we can continue to develop content that is valuable to you. If you want CEUs or a certificate for this webinar, remember to complete the quiz, which will become available at the end of this presentation. When this webinar ends, please click the Take Quiz link you will see on the left-hand side of your screen after the recording has finished. Please note that you must first complete the survey before you can take the quiz. The next presentation that Jen McCool will be presenting is on January 30th on engaging youth leaders. Here are some KIT resources. We would also love to stay connected with you via social media. So here are the channels for our Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest accounts. We appreciate you spending some of your time with us today, and we hope that you took away many great tips and tools to bring to your programs. Remember, KIT is here as a partner and a resource, so please reach out if we can assist you in any way. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Jennifer.